Hello, I'm Tom Payton, Director and Publisher of Trinity University Press. Thanks for joining us for the Dear America Town Hall. Once a month from now until the election in November, Trinity University Press and Terrain.org will bring you a virtual town hall event featuring contributors to the new book, Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy. With a patriotic spirit, hundreds of writers, artists, scientists, and community leaders have come together since 2016 to offer their impassioned words through Terrain.org's Letters to America project, now collected in this book. In the Dear America Town Hall events, we'll explore different themes including natural environment, violence and injustice, and activism and protest, all focused on reconciling conflicting political and social perspectives, reconsidering our moral imperatives, and inspiring meaningful change. The event tonight is also streamed live and archived on the Trinity University Press Facebook page, and the book is available at a special price just for you at dearamericabook.org. All links will be shown again at the end of the discussion. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Dodd, and I am the nonfiction editor at Terrain.org and one of the co-editors of Dear America. I am so happy to be able to host this evening's reading with such terrific writers. On behalf of myself and my wonderful co-editors, Derek Sheffield and Simmons Buntin, I want to say welcome and thanks to everyone who has joined us. Tonight's town hall reading is themed Natural Environs, the More Than Human World. I want to say just a little bit more about the book, in addition to what Tom has told you already. Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy. This is such a powerful and diverse collection of poems, prose pieces, and artwork. A third of the book consists of new, never-before-published work. These are letters that don't appear in our online series. The new work includes two of tonight's readers, Elena Passarello and Arthur Sze, while Elizabeth Bradfield and Pam Houston were important appearances as we launched the online project through our literary journal, Terrain.org. So even if you read Terrain.org regularly, you will want to buy a copy of the book. And I'll repeat what Tom just said. If you go to dearamericabook.org, that's Dear America Book, all one word, you can enter the promo code Town Hall in all caps, and you'll get 20% off the price. All the royalties go to three important nonprofits. We've chosen the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Natural Resources Defense Fund, the American Civil Liberties Union, and this portal, dearamericabook.org, is the way to maximize the funds that are going to these three stalwart organizations that are doing so much important work right now. Of course, you can also go to the bookseller of your choice, perhaps supporting a local bookstore. Meanwhile, in addition to the book, the online series continues. We have published 182 letters at Terrain.org, all beginning in the weeks immediately after the 2016 election and responding to the crisis of community that is the United States today. Since April, in the month of May, we have published 3 more letters online, including 2 uplifting poems by Tracy Brimhall and Allison Hawthorne Deming, and a prose letter just today by Kim Hecox. Okay, we may have more to say about the project later, but for now I do want to turn to our readers, which is why you all are here out there. We'll go in this order: Pam, Elena, Elizabeth, and Arthur, and I will introduce each one just before they read. And audience, if a question comes to mind as you're listening to our authors, you can send it through the Q&A button that you should find at the bottom of your Zoom interface, and we'll save about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the program, and I can share those questions with the authors for you. Okay, here we go. Pam Houston is the author of the memoir Deep Creek, Finding Hope in the High Country, as well as 2 novels, Contents May Have Shifted and Sighthound. She's written 2 collections of short stories, Cowboys Are My Weakness and Waltzing the Cat, and a collection of essays, A Little More About Me, all published by W.W. Norton. Her stories have been selected for volumes of the O. Henry Awards, the Pushcart Prize, Best American Travel Writing, and Best American Short Stories of the Century, among other anthologies. She's the winner of the Western States Book Award, the Willa Award for Contemporary Fiction, the Evil Companions Literary Award, and several teaching awards. She teaches in the low-res MFA program at the Institute of American Arts, is professor of English at UC Davis, and she is co-founder and creative director of the literary nonprofit Writing by Writers. She lives at 9,000 feet above sea level near the headwaters of the Rio Grande. Pam, please read to us.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's wonderful to be here. I'm really honored to be reading with my fellow readers, and thank you all for coming. This is called Hell Bent On. Dear America, every day for the last several years, my first thought upon waking and my last thought before going to sleep, and many thoughts in between, have been about our magnificent planet and how we seem hell-bent on its destruction at every turn. It's a desperation that threatens to double me over daily, hourly, and I wonder what evolution could have possibly been up to when it gave opposable thumbs and the ability to reason to the only species too stupid to understand that the first rule of survival is to protect one's own habitat. Since the election of a man who has promised to dismantle the EPA, sell off our big lands to big oil, our public lands to big oil, cancel, emperor style, the Paris Agreement, reinvigorate the Keystone Pipeline, and remove all protection from endangered species, that desperation has increased 100-fold. Simultaneously, every single other thing I value about this country, its diversity, its freedoms, its art and culture, its institutions of higher learning and all other forms of education, its tolerance, its generosity, its many compassions, has already come under direct attack from what promises to be the most toxic administration in American history. And yet, beneath the deep grief that threatens to pull me under, I feel an ember of hope burning in my ribcage. In the 5 days after the election, the Sierra Club quadrupled its monthly donation record. And in the same amount of time, the ACLU received roughly 120,000 donations totaling $7.2 million. I've been heartened to read San Francisco's Manifesto of Resistance and Resolve, and the letter all Vermonters just received, signed jointly by the outgoing Democratic governor and the incoming Republican governor, promising to disavow intolerance and hate. I am encouraged by artists and actors and scientists and the 365 corporations who have banded together to speak out against one unconstitutional campaign promise after another, and principled political leaders from both parties standing up for what America has always tried to be. What I feel in the collective atmosphere makes me believe that this time we will not go to sleep. We will not wind up in divisive squabbles between people who hold the same essential beliefs, because if we do so, many will suffer, and the suffering will be unmitigated and like nothing we have seen in this country before. I live in the high Rockies, in a valley that has so far been not much touched by corporate greed. It snowed overnight, and this morning my elderly horses wear a ridge of bright white along their dark spines and snowflakes in their eyelashes. Earlier, when I went out to feed, the pair of bald eagles who return to my property every other year were using the new snow to spot small moving creatures in my pasture. I heard the elk bugling last night before sunset, and at first light this morning, coyotes were singing with such full voice outside my bedroom window that my 2 Irish wolfhounds threw back their heads and sang along. I had a father whose tactics resembled those of our president-elect so precisely that in the aftermath of this election season, that's 2016, I can scarcely remember my father at all. My mother, now that I think of it, was not unlike our new First Lady, in the way she always kept her jaw so tight, turned her attention to looking good, and never kissed anything but the air. For parenting, I turned to the patch of remnant woods that ran behind our subdivision, to the railroad tracks that led into the dappled light of relatively undisturbed deciduous forests. When we went as a family to the beach for a week, I spent the last hour of every trip standing at the edge of the ocean saying an individual goodbye to each wave. The natural world did not just heal me from the abuses I suffered at the hands of my father. It raised me up to be the person I am. I am ready to give my money, my time, and if it comes to it, my life for the right to save the earth. And if it is too late for that, I will give all those things to at least have the freedom to sit at her bedside and grieve. I have no time or energy anymore for cynicism, anger, vanity, or even despair. We must work together to cultivate hope and courage. A lot of us have had the good fortune of living in this beautiful country, in this improbable democracy, without being asked to participate fully in its care. Now we have been given the opportunity to fight for our freedoms. Now we have been given a mandate to lead more radically meaningful lives. Sincerely and with love, Pam Houston. And the only thing I'll say in addition to that, I was thinking when I was asked to participate in this that, oh, that letter will be so outdated. And of course it isn't. It's just more so. And I guess the only thing I would add to that, if I were to write that letter today from here in the pandemic and the dismantling of the Constitution, I would say just to notice two things that I've noticed. One is how easily we've been erased from the landscape, how perfectly and easily we've been erased. And when I look up to the mountains from my house, I think that even the trees like it better without us up there. And so I think that's just something to keep in mind, but also all the things that all the things I thought I needed that I didn't. I'm keeping a list. So in that way, the pandemic has been an opportunity for me to think about all the things, airplane travel highest among them, that I thought I needed to make me happy. And that's been a thing that's been sneaking into my mind, for years, like, you got to stop flying on airplanes if you really love the earth, like you say you do. And suddenly, and that would have been the hardest thing for me by far, to give up, to go to places I'd never seen. But now it's seeming like there might be another set of things that might make me happy, and those things might be a little kinder to the earth. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pam. I know a lot of people took a lot of courage from that piece when we first published it in December of 2016. And I think it does still resonate today. And I appreciate hearing. Thank you. Elena Passarello's essays have recently appeared in National Geographic, Paris Review, and Best American Science and Nature Writing. She's the author of 2 award-winning collections, Let Me Clear My Throat and Animals Strike Curious Poses, the latter of which was translated into 4 languages. In 2019, Outside named Elena one of the 25 essential women authors writing about the wild. A 2015 recipient of the Whiting Award in Nonfiction, she teaches in the MFA program at Oregon State University and can be heard weekly on the radio in the PRX Arts and Culture Show, Live Wire. Elena.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. Hi, people that I can't see. What an honor to be doing this, and to be following Pam is a dubious honor, I suppose, because it's a hard thing to do. But I'm so grateful to be in the company of these writers, grateful to Simmons, Elizabeth, Derek, Bergen, and Trinity University Press for including my letter in this beautiful honker of a book that I hope you all pick up. I didn't know how to write a letter to a whole country when Elizabeth asked me to do this. And so I decided to write just to our country's animals. And then when I tried to do that, I couldn't even do that. I had to pick a single animal to write to. So this is a letter to an animal in particular, the one that I wish could more publicly represent our nation. My dear friend, earlier this summer, I spent a week in Alaska, a part of the country that wasn't even the state when my parents were born. I didn't encounter you among the estuaries and bird refugees, the bear tours and kayak excursions and countless American flags, but I know you were somewhere nearby. And even though you and I didn't cross paths in Alaska, I did manage to spot a moose, my first ever. David and I were walking near the nature center in downtown Homer, rounding a shady part of the trail, and there she was. "Look at that fat horse," David said, not realizing what grazed before us. He'd never been near her kind either. Though this was not for lack of trying. I've made see a moose my New Year's resolution every year since 2009. Before that, it was set more reasonable goals. Over the past decade, we've scoured parts of Maine, Vermont, Michigan, New Hampshire, Montana, and Wyoming for a glimpse. And I can't remember why I made the resolution in the first place. Sometimes we lose sight of what first prompts our ambitions, buried as they are under the storytelling we inadvertently heap upon them. More surprising than how long it took to see a moose is the fact that I have never come face to face with you in any of the 47 states I've set foot in. Unlike moose, which only thrive in a few northern biomes, you've made space for yourself in every American landscape save its deserts. Crafty and resilient, you require little more than a fresh waterway to reroute and trees to fell with your orange iron-enriched teeth. While the creatures that look most like me, with our vulnerable skin and useless dentition, came to this continent only a dozen millennia ago, versions of your miraculous form have shaped this land for over 7 million years. One huge variant walked this continent throughout the Pleistocene, tall as a modern bear. And though the real you has eluded me, I see at least a dozen cartoonish versions of you daily, since you're the chosen symbol of both the state where I live and the university that employs me. In my town, you're on buildings, ball caps, yoga pants, but your image can't seem to hold the menace required of most sports mascots like Wolverines or Diamondbacks or Raptors. So a few years ago, my college rebranded you down to a series of jet black lines, hoping to erase your goofiness with abstraction. But fans hated it, so they reverted to a 1970s throwback image of you in a Gilligan hat and a buck-toothed smile. That moose that we met in Alaska was goofy too, but large enough to take our breath away. A tawny calf trailed behind her, all knees and matchstick legs. We kept our distance from the pair, but followed for a long while, and so did another couple who took pictures. Despite how exotic the Alaska moment felt to us out-of-towners, I now see how the moose connects to certain core ideas of our country. Even though species from the Alcis genus roam 2 other continents, only in North America are the beasts called moose, a word with Algonquin origins. I also see America in the natural facts of moose, an animal bigger than the largest SUV in a Costco parking lot and famously tough to kill. Unsubtle, yet strong and instinctive, moose kick in all directions, even sideways, which aligns with the more vindictive expressions of the American spirit. On the other hand, moose are reluctant to attack, except during the annual rut, and prefer wandering alone to vying for new territories. Neither of those practices ring as particularly American, nor does the fact that moose are vegetarians. One could, I suppose, scan the traits of any creature that lives here exclusively and find something that jibes with an American ideal. We might stretch our imaginations to locate the American spirit in the chumminess of the Carolina chicken turtle, or the vicious bite of the American alligator, the country we aspire to be captured in the doggedness of the island night lizard, or the benevolence of the long-nosed gar. It feels silly to extend the country into these kinds of American bodies, and that's unfortunate. I wish we didn't reserve our national identity for only the regal or formidable beasts among us. The part of Alaska that we visited isn't just stocked with moose, it's also overrun with bald eagles. Though endangered throughout my youth, they're everywhere now. Once an American unicorn, and now ubiquitous as a woodpecker. Up in Homer, David pointed out nests sprawled over the tops of light poles, and I saw an enormous female curb stomp a fish in the hotel parking lot. We got the sense that the birds were everywhere, watching over us when we walked home from the bar at midnight. One Homer resident told me locals were so tired of bald eagles at this point that they've renamed them dumpster ducks. A guy at the Salty Dog told me he most often sees them dead on the side of the Sterling Highway, and let me tell you, he said, they leave a mark. A few years ago, my heart nearly stopped when I thought I saw your lifeless body along the exit to a North Carolina town called, appropriately enough, Lumberton. But any roadkill that resembles you usually turns out to be a rat-tailed nutria instead, that invasive species imported to America in the 19th century after the fur industry had nearly run out of your kind. What lovely top hats, liners, perfumes, and leather you once made. Before chasing after gold or timber or a nice golf community in Scottsdale to spend one's retirement, the first Western expansion pursued you. And in centuries prior, the land you cleared prompted humans to walk in your shadow. Whenever you revamp an American ecosystem, carving out deep ponds to keep your nuclear families safe, your work welcomes myriad others. The plains you irrigate attract my new friend the moose. Your ingenious dams, often hundreds of feet in length, may have spurred behavioral evolution in American fish. As the adage goes, it's you who taught the salmon to jump. When Congress elected the bald eagle as our national symbol, Benjamin Franklin famously protested, calling the eagle a bird of bad moral character who does not get his living honestly, like those among men who live by sharping and robbing. But Thomas Jefferson was compelled by the bald eagle's longevity, as well as its macho visage. Compared to the eagle's focused Gregory Peck glower, your face is much more Paul Giamatti, with that weak chin and myopic gaze. But within those eyes lies a gobsmacking vision. Labor is so hardwired into your furry body that the mere sound of running water unleashes your insatiable urge to chew. No animal other than humans can match your drive to work a landscape until it changes, for better or worse. And I ask you, how American is that? I wonder what would have been different had Franklin and Jefferson recognized America in your round body and sloping forehead. What I see in you is enough to make me wish that your name were a lyric in every national anthem. So I just sat for 20 minutes trying to think of all the words a patriotic poet could have rhymed with your name: receiver, achiever, reliever, believer, because I want to stand up at ball games with my cap over my heart and holler the verses of that nation. America, symbolized not by a formidable high-flying thief or a sideways kicking mass with antlers, but by 30 pounds of oily fur and stinky glands. After all, what's wrong with goofy power, especially if it shows up to work every day? I want to picture the American dream as embodied in your lodges, ingenious piles of scented mud with multiple rooms and cold storage. I want to pass laws inspired by your hospitality and desire for collaboration. I know it's easiest to paint blunt, self-serving pictures of the creatures that we've never met, but still, I can't stop wishing it was your face printed on my money. Between the moose and the bald eagle and the chicken turtle and all the other animals unique to the land on which our nation was built, I hereby cast my vote for you as poster child. Sorry, dumpster ducks. All this returns me to the news story that made me love you from 2006, when you swam up the Bronx River and settled into New York City for the first time in 2 centuries. You dutifully built your lodge, but had no mate to share it. And that fall, you were often spotted atop your muddy hut with a muskrat, gazing at the stars. I would sew this image onto a flag as a commitment to welcome into our spaces those who don't exactly look like us, championing the fact that your buildings, though fortified, are not walls. Please, dear friend, take me and the raptors, the moose, and all the other creatures of this country onto the roof of your lodge. Let us sit with you all night, considering the swell of hard work that's just downriver. If we place you in the center of our heart, will you warn us of what's to come with a hearty slap of your tail? If we swim toward all that you've built, can you teach us how to jump? Fondly, Elena Passarello. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Elena. As an aside, my students loved this piece when you visited our campus. We might have been your first audience, I think. That was wonderful. For teacher listeners who might like to use Dear America in your own teaching, Terrain.org's education editor, Janine DeBase, has created a great set of writing and discussion prompts and lesson plans, which you can access at terrain.org/Dear-America. So you might want to go there, and if you're teaching remotely or face-to-face in the fall, bring some of that into your classroom. Elizabeth Bradfield is next. She is the author of the books Once Removed, Approaching Ice, Interpretive Work, and Toward Antarctica. Theorem, a collaboration with the visual artist Antonia Contro, is forthcoming this fall from Poetry Northwest Editions. Her work has been published in The New Yorker, Kenyon Review, and elsewhere. Her honors include the Audre Lorde Prize and a Stegner Fellowship. She is founder and editor-in-chief of Broadsided Press, which publishes monthly visual literary collaborations as free posters for anyone to download and print. She works as a naturalist, a guide, and a marine educator, and she teaches creative writing at Brandeis University. Elizabeth, please read to us.
Hi, everybody. How could I not love an essay about the beaver? Come on, it's like my favorite animal. We have beaver logs in our yard that we collect assiduously because there are not any beavers where I live on Cape Cod, even though there are many in Massachusetts. And Pam, that essay that you read is just heartbreaking and beautiful, and it's such an honor to be here tonight. I look forward to hearing Arthur Sze read as well. I was thinking a little bit about the anthology, Dear America, and the section that I find myself housed within, sharing space with Pam Houston, with Arthur Sze, also with Sean Hill, David Gessner, and Camille Dungy, who are writers I admire so much. And our section in the Dear America anthology is titled Geographies of Inclusion and Renewal. And I find that a really interesting way of thinking about America and where we are, especially given America's complicated history with manifest destiny. But there is such a sense of geography and a questioning of how land shapes our perception of place. For me, as a citizen of this country, this letter to Dear America, I wrote, I had been asked to write it, and I really struggled, I'll be honest. I struggled for a long time to find the right way to begin. And it wasn't until I was actually in Antarctica that I found an entry point into writing this piece. A colleague of mine, another naturalist, Luke Kenny, passed me this book. And I was looking at this book as we were traveling from the Antarctic Peninsula back to South America. And I was thinking about the words and images of this book, and they were so inspiring and so thrilling. And I thought, all right, this is what I want to write to America at this moment, which was 2017 at that point. This was in the 2016-17 season that I was working down there. And I guess I also want to say before I begin that, you know, my work as a naturalist and guide is one of the many things that right now I'm really questioning in my orientation to the world. I love working as a naturalist. I love being on boats. I love sharing natural history information with people, sharing experiences with people, opening wild spaces with information and delight. But can we keep doing that? And a couple weeks ago, I was asked by shipmates who were stuck on a boat for 60 days, moving from Antarctica, trying to get home, not being welcomed by any port. This was a small ship with 100 passengers that had not had any symptoms of COVID, but they were rebuffed and rebuffed and rebuffed by various communities. And so the people on board were struggling to find something to do. So they emailed me and asked me to offer a writing workshop to my friends and colleagues who were stuck on the boat, which I did via WhatsApp in a voice-only situation. It was very bizarre. But thinking about those people who were roaming the world unmoored in this time and really powerless was an intense experience. So I think all of that kind of swirls for me a little bit now in thinking about this essay and in offering it to you. And now I have to duck down and get my glasses, which fell off my lap. So please excuse me. All right, so this is part of Dear America and also part of Toward Antarctica. I included it in the back of this newest book of mine and titled it there, Epilogue, A Letter Home, January 8th, 2017. Dear America, a wandering albatross just soared by my porthole. I am in the Southern Ocean, traveling between Antarctica and South America. Before the birds startled me, I was reading Tees Matson and Kiki Erickson's beautiful book about the 2 years they spent on South Georgia Island, moving from bay to bay in their small wooden sailboat. Small wooden sailboat. In bays and fjords that freeze over in winter, in the long dark of howling weather, along a coast with no backup plan, no bluster to their stories, no swagger or machismo. From 2009 to 2011, they were surprised and humbled and charmed and terrified by penguins and glaciers and leopard seals and storms and solitude. For them, the vast raw place was made of intimate moments, tenderness even. America, I want all of us to know wild places in this way. I've spent the last month working as a naturalist on a ship that spends the austral summer taking tourists to the Antarctic. When I joined the expedition, we left Ushuaia at the tip of South America, crossed the Drake, prowled a few bays and shores of the Antarctic Peninsula on foot and by Zodiac, returned, headed east toward the Falkland Islands and South Georgia, sailed southwest to the peninsula again, and are now heading north. The boat will do variations of this route all season, carrying visitors from America, Australia, China, India, Europe, and elsewhere, all of whom have found a way to get here, to this longed-for, difficult, leaderless continent set aside in 1959 for peaceful purposes only, as a space for scientific investigation and cooperation toward that end. In their epilogue, Tees and Kiki write about the phenomenal recovery of South Georgia Island after industrial whaling sputtered and the island was abandoned by people. Tussock grass returned to the trampled hillsides. Skies cleared of blubber smoke. Fur seals rebounded from near extinction. Solitude was part of the balm, but so was the hard work of people who began to pull back the harm done, introduced rats and reindeer, asbestos in the ruining buildings. The restoration of that place is working and it is not working. Certain things are healing, but other harms encroach. America, recovery is more complicated and more simple than we know. At home on Cape Cod, I have been tracking the decades-long recovery of the gray seal population here. Some think their return is not restoration, but ruination of what we came to know in their absence. Some want to start killing them again. I don't agree, but I'm interested in the different places our understandings come from. Where do we source our information, and how do we scrape down to the truth? How are we going to agree and make a plan to move forward, America, on this one subject in our crowded, conflicted, contradictory, not wholly known land? There are so many subjects about which we are asking these questions. In Antarctica, the ocean today feels the same as it did 5 years ago, the last time I worked these waters. The same birds soar above the waves, tipping their wings. My wonder is greater upon returning. My knowledge of the threats they face, greater too. America, some of you have asked, but I can't say that I see the effects of climate change here firsthand. There are differences, but are they moments or trends? I started looking too late. I haven't looked long enough. But that doesn't mean I don't believe the scientific papers about warming oceans, rising seas, acidification, changing weather. It doesn't mean I don't fear the consequences. Now, I am headed home, back to grocery shopping and teaching and bills, back to neighbors and their conflicting political yard signs. I've been keeping up with the news in small doses. I've been plotting my course. Was it an escape to come to the cold, hard edge of the world? Did I flee? Did tease and kiki? Maybe, but I have to believe that we return to our homes changed and strengthened, better able to make new connections and see from new perspectives, maybe even better at slowing time. America, how do we care for what is far from us as well as what is near? How do we acknowledge the legacy of a plastic-wrapped sandwich or throwaway keychain? I embody so many of our modern American contradictions. My environmentalism and my 120-mile commute, my certainty that wild spaces are necessary and my chugging toward them in a diesel-powered boat, my love of diverse community, and my home in a largely white township. On this ship, among the crew, Americans are in the minority. As a crew, we are Filipino, Indian, South African, Bulgarian, Austrian, Chinese, New Zealander, Latvian, Irish, Colombian, and more. There are fissures between us, bigotries, but also a sense of the interdependence we share aboard the ship. But then, one fragile hull holds us all, doesn't it, America? Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was wonderful. How do we scrape down to the truth? I think maybe that needs to be a section title in the next edition. And for those of you out in the audience who haven't yet seen her new poetry collection, Toward Antarctica, you can read a very enthusiastic review of it in terrain.org, which, and this is my spoiler alert, illuminates this letter's role in the whole collection. Arthur Sze is our next reader. His many honors include a Lannan Literary Award, the Lila Wallace Reader's Digests Award, a Western States Book Award for Translation. He's received grants and fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Witter-Binner Foundation. His book, Compass Rose, was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, and Sightlines won the National Book Award. Arthur is Professor Emeritus at the Institute of American Indian Arts. His new and collected poems, The Glass Constellation, will be published in the spring of 2021 by Copper Canyon Press. Arthur.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Am I okay? I just want to take a minute and say it's a great pleasure to be reading with Pam, Elena, and Elizabeth. And thank you, Elizabeth, for coordinating this evening. I'm going to start with my contribution, which is a short poem, and it's called Bridge. Just as the sky brightens over this ridge, it darkens over that river. Me, mine, wants to string barbed wire along this fence, along that wall. From a bridge over a river, lights of two countries glimmer at dusk. Here, I pull a translucent cactus needle out of your hand. This is a short poem called Black Center. Green tulips are rising out of the earth. You don't cleanse a whale or fire at beer cans in an arroyo, but catch the budding tips of pear branches and wonder what it's like to live along a purling edge of spring. Jefferson once tried to assemble a mastodon skeleton on the White House floor, but with pieces missing, failed to sequence the bones. When the last speaker of a language dies, a hue vanishes from the spectrum of visible light. Last night, you sped past revolving and flashing red, blue, and white lights along the road, a wildfire in the dark. Though no one you knew was taken in the midnight ambulance, an arrow struck a bullseye and quivered in its shaft. 1 minute gratitude rises like water from an underground lake. Another dissolution gnaws from a black center. And I wanted to close by reading about half of Elizabeth Rush's letter, which is titled Dear Soon-to-be Sprout. And it's in the last section of the anthology, which is titled Togethering, which is a really nice way of bringing people together. Dear soon-to-be Sprout, it's possible that as I write, you are rooting yourself deep in my uterine walls. It's also possible that your will-be dad sperm missed the rendezvous we arranged with my eggs, and that we will have to try for you in another 3 weeks' time. I love that phrasing, to try for someone. I suppose that is what motherhood will hold, a whole lot of attempting on behalf of another being. As I write, I'm not thinking about what color to paint your room or what name you might carry, tender spark. I'm thinking of a letter Alexis Pauline Gumbs wrote to her past self from a changed future, where society is no longer steeped in cheap fossil fuels. Imagine that. One line of her missive reads, now life, not exactly easier, is life all the time. I first encountered those words back in the spring after I returned from a reporting trip to Antarctica, where I'd watch a chunk of one of the world's key glacial systems collapse right in front of me. It augmented my already extraordinary ability to conjure up endings, though my skill, mind you, is not born of delusion. Last year, the Spix's macaw, a wily blue bird with a long tail that I'm certain you would have loved, went extinct in the wild. Also gone, a songbird called the cryptic tree hunter. How fabulous a name is that? And the Hawaiian land snail. In the year before we began to try for you, human beings, and in particular, human beings from the country where you will be born, forced a few species from the earth forever. Were I a weatherman, I would call my mind a tidal wave, a temperature gauge, broken and blistering, which is why I guess I needed those words, life all the time, fiercely. Sure, they gave me solace, but they also lent me something even more crucial, an alternative to work toward, something I think reason mixed with laziness and fatigue fills the future I often imagine with drought and famine and death. It's more difficult to know that something will persist and that it's our job to shape that something into something good. I'll admit, I fear your absence and also my presumptuousness in writing you so soon. I wake up in the middle of the night anxious that whatever could become your consciousness might not grow in my belly. And I try to tell myself that if that does happen, it isn't my body's betrayal, but rather some basic biology and that I will find another way to make a family. Which is to say, when I think of you, I think of all the things that don't have to exist. Your feet and clavicles, and little soon-to-be eyelashes, but that might just become part of the world. I think of the nothingness in which beginnings begin. I think of the hard country where we live now and what it can with work become, a place where all of our energy comes in renewable forms, where high-speed, zero-carbon trains connect here and there. A home where for the first time in a long time, living doesn't also mean systematically dismantling the weave of life we depend upon. I'll stop here. It's a lovely letter.
Thank you, Arthur. Thanks for both of those poems. I think Bridge is such a searing, searing poem. We've had a question come in through the chat that I want to ask you first. The audience member asks, what was the title again of your second poem that you read to us?
Black Center.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks as well for reading a portion of Elizabeth Rush's letter. By the way, that's another piece that is brand new for the anthology, as was Arthur's letter, his poem Bridge. Again, that's the anthology. And for anyone who tuned in late, if you wish to try to order this from dearamericabook.org, you can use the promo code TOWNHALL and you can get 20% off the price. Before turning to other Q&A, I just want to thank all of these authors so much. This has been a really remarkable evening of your language, your words, and your faces in your writing places. It's great to see you in your home environs. I want to thank as well Bergen Streetman for handling our technology this evening, and Tom Payton for kicking us off, the editor-in-chief at Trinity University Press. And I want to announce the next in our series of town hall readings. We have one of these planned each month through November 2020. And Terrain.org poetry editor Derek Sheffield will be moderating the June event. And his theme is Against Hatred, Writing That Builds Community. And it will feature the authors Jane Hirschfield, Drew Lanham, Kurt Caswell, and Blas Falconer. And it will take place June 24th at 7 p.m. Central Time. And you can register now for that event and get helpful reminders in your email if you go to dearamericabook.org. So again, thanks all of you. Let me start with this question, please. And for all of you, would any or all of you authors care to comment on what the letter form means to you as an idea? Even if your contribution doesn't start with a salutation or look very much like a letter, what does the concept of writing to America mean for you right now?
I can go.
Please, Pam.
I can start. Well, I do think the letter, I mean, for me, when I was interested to hear Elizabeth say she struggled with the question, because when you asked me to do it right after the election, I was dying to write a letter to America because I was so paralyzed by fear and disappointment and all the things I was paralyzed by. And writing a letter to the country felt like a terrific way to express that. At this time in 2020, when we're all apart, I have found again letters being so important as a way to feel that something of my former life is intact. And I've been writing letters with a few different writer friends. You know, they're emails, but they're letters, if you know what I mean. They're long letters. And and I was excited about the question because one set of those letters, I had been asked, Orion magazine did a series called Together Apart, where different writers wrote to each other. And Amy Irvine and I started writing to each other in March for the series, and they wanted 3,000 words, and we gave them 3,000 words. And then we just were like, no, this is the only time I'm coherent and sane, as the pandemic deepened and the pandemic was being used against democracy. When all of those things began to happen, I was trying to write, I think Amy was trying to write, but we only made sense when we were writing each other's letters, when there was a recipient, when there was somebody out there. And so that book of letters that Amy and I wrote over the next 2 months is going to come out from Tory House Press before the election. They're rushing it. The wonderful women of Tory House Press are rushing it so that it might make some small difference prior to the election. But so I guess what I would say is I've always been a fan of the letters. I have always, when I've been stuck in my own writing, thought just write a letter to someone, even if you don't send it. It's always been a way to encourage me to express myself honestly when I know that there's a recipient, or when I have some idea of a recipient, especially if it's someone like Amy, who I admire and I'm trying to impress and be my best self in front of. And so I think the letters, I think I give a whole craft talk on letters as form and how it's always exciting to read somebody else's mail. And I think it's a wonderful form, and I'm delighted to be part of it. But I think in this case, particularly as a political tool, it's excellent.
I guess I want to follow up because we had such different knee-jerk reactions, although I think maybe we had similar eventual reactions to the letter form. But I know, Sean Hill, the poet, who has a piece in Dear America, is a really good friend of mine. He often works in the postcard format, and I don't know, I think a lot of my writing has been, has felt more like a secret note held from the public. Like I'm writing a secret poet's note in the world of biology. I'm writing a secret biologist's note in the world of poetry. And so the idea of a letter is this big, expansive, especially to America, felt like this big, expansive thing and a huge responsibility. But I think what it made me really grapple with, and what I'm grateful for, is that on the street where I live, I live in Massachusetts. I live on Cape Cod, and Massachusetts is a blue state. But honestly, where I live, every other house is a different political yard sign from the last election, and I assume for the one going forward, although the pandemic has changed things a little bit. And so trying to think about, how do I write to everybody from this small town, from an awareness that even my neighbors on either side of me are coming from wildly different perspectives, was a huge challenge and really, really interesting. And I think what I love about living in a small town is that I can see those differences, and I can see not only the yard signs of those differences, but the subtleties of those differences and the ways that we negotiate each other. And I think a letter is a way to kind of acknowledge that that personal difference without politicizing it. And I think the letter form for me was a really interesting way to try and engage not only what I felt, but what I saw others feeling around me in 2016 and also now.
Would either Elena or Arthur like to answer?
I guess I'll say that, can you hear me? I'll say that I didn't write my contribution as a letter per se. You know, it doesn't say Dear America. And I want to say that when Derek and Simmons asked me to join the project, I thought, oh, I can't write a letter to America. It's like so big. So how would one do that? But then when thanks to their persistence, when I sat down to write something, I just thought, well, you know, letters have a kind of, or can have a kind of intimacy and a kind of sense of conscience where one is revealing or discovering something as one's writing. So, and in that sense, a letter can also be a bridge between two people or between a person and the rest of the country. And so it felt awkward for me to put like Dear America in front of such a short poem. It was like calling too much attention to itself. But I was thinking of the idea of a letter behind the poem and the way that one writes to communicate or to make a bridge or connection to someone else. And by extension, the connection to the country at large. And I'll just say in that short poem, The Bridge, of course, I was also thinking of the literal bridge between Mexico, Ciudad Juarez, and El Paso, Texas, the United States, which if you've ever stood on that bridge, you are standing over the Rio Grande River and you can see the lights glimmering on both sides. And it's like, it seemed like a perfect metaphor for me of a way that a letter can reach out and connect.
Thank you, three. Another question has come in. A question I've become obsessed with lately is, where do you find hope in this current mess?
I find hope in work. There's some stuff to do. Every day I learn about more stuff that needs to be done. And so when I need, I don't know if I call it hope, but when I need some energy, I find something to do that sort of takes me outside myself and contributes.
Yeah, I find hope in the writing of the young people that I work with. I teach at the Institute of American Indian Arts in the master's program. I have 4 thesis students who just finished writing amazing books to be. And also at the University of California, Davis, where I have 4 other graduate students. So that's 8 books. 8 books I've read in the last 2 weeks that are all about us learning how to recognize our own history as a country and how to perhaps go forward. To speak very broadly about them, I won't go through all 8, but and I find hope in all the people who haven't given up. I'm one of those people, when things are basically okay, like I can go down a wormhole of disaster forecasting like nobody's business, but when the shit really hits the fan, like I can find hope anywhere because I need it. We had a lamb a couple weeks ago whose name is Becky, an Icelandic lamb, and I find hope in her. I find hope in the color of the aspen leaves, which are just coming out this week. I find hope. I find hope in the idea that the earth may just go on without us. I find hope there, honestly. But I also don't think we're done fighting. And I was personally born for this fight. I was raised in the house of this fight. So I'm ready to fight. I'm fighting as hard as I can and will continue to.
I agree with Pam. I mean, I think that for me on a daily personal level, like seeing right now the spring kind of come into being. Just this week, I've seen the sarsaparilla pop up and the sassafras blooms come out and the star flowers and the warbler migration has been going on, and looking outside the human world to those ongoingnesses has been a huge solace for me. Just today, actually, I was in a Zoom conference call with some friends and a friend who's in a facility that is inaccessible right now. She has Parkinson's, and it's the first time we've ever kind of done a Zoom conference with her, and it was great. And so I think that desire for human connection, that reach to keep building bridges with people, between people, to reach out, to see the natural world, to find each other, to do all of this. And then, man, if we can use this moment as a moment to reevaluate and reconsider capitalism, dare I say it? Wow. We need to do it. And that would be really amazing. So I have hope in that as well. I have hope that the crisis of this moment is going to push us to do some really radical reevaluation of what we value, how we value it, how we express our care for each other in this country. And it's going to be a big haul, given the structures around our political system, around our country, around capitalism. But I do have a little bit of hope that the crisis of this moment will be strong enough to push us to make some really radical change.
Well, thank you all. Our hour is pretty much rounded out. I see that Bergen has given more information about the book and about the upcoming events in the chat. Audience, thank you from across the country, all of you who tuned in. We so appreciate your spending time with us this evening. Again, writers, thank you for your hope. Thank you for your fierceness. Thank you for your steadfastness to the planet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you to all the other Arthur and Pam and Elena. This is so amazing to hear you read.
Is it?